Hi. Um, I think it's quite funny, and I don't really know where to start. So I made my last video, and it's a bit of a joke really how a lot of people make their last videos but they never stop. I think I came to a point in my life where I got I stopped doing the photography and everything else, and I'll come on to all that later on. And I also thought in photography, especially, I didn't have anything else to say. And I don't really in photography. I might touch on that subject again later on, but I then did my last YouTube video, went and looked at TikTok, went and looked at Instagram to see how I would produce videos long and short on Instagram and TikTok. I haven't got any content. Now, I say content because I record my content as I go, like I am now, except I'm recording this in landscape. And I then put other content in that I've already shot that's also shot in landscape. Now, what I haven't got is I haven't got any content at all shot in portrait, which is the sort of preferred medium for TikTok and Instagram. Now, I did a little experiment on Instagram, which has become completely impossible photography, and I shot some short portrait video, and I put it on as stories, and it got actually quite a lot of hits. Now, you know, I'm not into hits anyway, and if I'm talking to nobody, but I'm talking for myself, I find that quite therapeutic at the moment. When I go out for a walk, the voice in my head, which I've learned isn't me, talks to me constantly, as our voice in our heads talks to us constantly all the time. And I'm going to come on to that in some later videos. But I have decided I have got something relevant to say. I've also decided that people do listen. And I've had a lot of contact, both on YouTube and private messages from people, which has been quite encouraging considering it was my last video. The other interesting thing is people didn't unsubscribe, which means, I guess, you thought I might do another one. I didn't. I thought that was it. But isn't it surprising that when we relieve ourselves of the burden to do anything anymore, suddenly we're inspired to do more? I then watched a podcast by Stephen Bartlett, The Diary of the CEO, a few months back, with a guy that I downloaded his audiobook and I started listening to it. I'll come on to that at a later date as well. And it sort of inspired me. And then some of my friends, Lee Glasgow, the main one, has had a slight change in career, or is changing career. And he's helped me a lot to understand a lot of things. So with the help of himself and a lot of books I've been listening to and a lot of books I've been reading, I've learned quite a lot about myself. Now, I know quite a lot about myself anyway, because I regularly reflect on my life, what I've been doing, how I've got to where I am, where I plan to go. It never quite works out all the time how I expect. I've always had a bit of an insight into life and the world, and being dyslexic and being slightly on the spectrum, I see things in a different way. I'm not saying I'm like Steve Jobs, but I do predict trends and I do predict what's going to happen in a certain way. I couldn't do the lottery and win, but I can say which way the world's going just by studying people, places, other countries, because sometimes what happens in America comes to us later on, whereas it used to be the other way around. So I've learned sort of to predict trends. I know what's going to happen probably in marketing sometimes. I know what's going to be happening in photography next. But it becomes tiring to be involved in all that. And I've talked about social media, and I will go on about social media, but I've decided, this being the first one, to do something a little bit different with YouTube. Now, I always wanted to do podcasts. And I looked into all the kit, and as some of you might know, I've had hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of video equipment over the years and audio equipment and everything for photography and recording. And I sold it all when I retired and put the money in the bank. And I don't want to spend any money anymore on that type of kit, I don't think. So this is being recorded on an iPhone. It's not as smart and as slick as someone like Steve Bartlett's videos, with all the kit he uses probably behind the camera, because there's a lot going on there. There's lots of sliders, there's lots of movement, and there's lots of stuff going on, the camera tricks to keep you interested. Whereas all you get is me sitting in front of a camera. Now, some people may be interested in that and some people not, but I think if I can help people understand certain things that have happened to me over my lifetime, it might help them in theirs. And I was walking the dog today and I bumped into a girl that I haven't seen for a while, and we got chatting. And she was saying that she'd never really thought about, she was saying that she lived a frugal life and she watches all her friends going out and partying, enjoying themselves and everything else. And she's not sure whether she's going in the right direction or not. Now, I'm not going to give her age away, but she's under 30, and I might mention her later on, so I've got to be a bit careful. But she's never really thought about retirement. Now, I never really thought about retirement until I was probably 35, I reckon. I actually started thinking about it. And at 35, I decided I wanted to retire at 55. Now, the basis of today's video is about retirement and what's happened. I'm 58. What has happened is things haven't quite gone to plan, and they've not gone to plan for many reasons. And I know there's people out there that have heard this story a million times, but I am going to tell it again because I think I need to start with a starting point and then move on. Elaine and a few of my other friends have always said to me, you need to write a book about your life. Now, I'm not 100% sure I could do that being dyslexic, or I wouldn't even know, but maybe I should learn the skills to do that. I know I enjoy writing my blog, but I struggle with a beginning, middle and an end, and to get all those thoughts of my whole life down on paper is quite difficult. But to still tell stories like this to a camera, I can do it because I can sit and talk to people. I can stand on stage, or used to be able to. I think I could probably go back to that, but I wouldn't want to. I could talk to people and I can talk to a camera. I'm not 100% sure I could sit and write a book. So the podcast thing would be a good idea, but I don't want to spend thousands of pounds on podcast equipment and start doing it and then decide it's really not for me. However, I do believe that it's possible, and I want you to help me out here, to listen to YouTube in your car. Now, I've listened to someone's YouTube in my car before. I've just plugged my phone into my car and I've listened to their YouTube like I would a podcast. So I don't want to make a podcast and then keep my YouTube videos going. I want to do one thing. Now, maybe in the future, I will do it the other way around, or maybe combine it. I don't know. I don't want too much hassle. But my iPhone on a tripod in front of me can be anywhere. It could be in the Lake District, it could be in Scotland, it could be anywhere. It's easy. And maybe 2 iPhones. I could use someone else's iPhone and my iPhone, edit them together. I could possibly even do some Zoom podcast type things. I don't really know. I prefer to actually be with people and talk to people. And I haven't asked him yet, but I'm going to talk to Lee Glasgow, and I'm going to try and set something up with Lee to do like a podcast thing just like this and see how it goes. And that will be a video in the future. Anyway, this video is about what happened to me over a period of time, and also why that changed my plan. And from after this video onwards, I'm going to try and incorporate a much of my old life stories, which a lot of people find extremely interesting, into these videos. There's a lot of things people don't know about me. I think they do interest other people. I find a lot of them hilarious and funny the way they've gone. You would be shocked who I've met, who I've associated with, and the things I've got up to in my life. The people that know me from my past and now have a bit of an insight. But I am going to try and incorporate that as much as I can into what I'm going to do in the future. Now, I'm not going to promise to do a video a month, or like I did before, promise anything, because I know how these things go and I go up and down. It's not depression, but I will come on to that. But I go up and down, and 1 minute I might want to make a video and 1 minute I won't. So I can't be the YouTuber that does a new video every Monday. It's not going to happen. But who knows, in the future, if I get enough content, it might happen. Now, content-wise, I've just walked today and I thought, I haven't got any content, but I have got content. I've got 58 years of content in my head of my life, other people's lives, other people's stories, and if it's relevant and we can talk about it, then it might help people. So today, I'm going to talk about what happened to me over the last few years and why that's relevant. So as I say, I'm 58, 59 this year, and 60 the year after. and I was going to retire at 55. That was the dream. And I've become almost a workaholic. My emails were in there hundreds every day. I was trying to do all the stuff for the companies I did work for, from Fujifilm to everyone else. And I was a slave to that. I also put myself in some situations which I didn't want to be in, that I found some of them I enjoyed. So I stepped out of my box and stepped out of my comfort zone, and I became something different. I will come on to a lot of the aspects of that in the future, but I'm going to try and keep on track today, which is quite hard. But so my dream was to retire at 55. And I had that sort of etched in my head. And Kevin Mullins and a few people I work with used to joke with me that, yeah, you're going to retire, you're going to retire. And I said, I've semi-retired, or I'm semi-retiring. The truth is, I don't think I would have retired. I think I'd have just kept going. There was something in me driving me. And even though Jane was set to retire at 60, I think I'd have carried on working until at least 60 and then tried to do some more. But circumstances changed. So let's go to look at that. Approximately 2016, I started getting back problems. Now, these back problems were basically brought on because I'd had a motorcycle accident in my 30s, which stopped me powerlifting and which stopped me doing a lot of sport. In fact, I couldn't walk. I was in hospital, broken back, broken arms and legs, and I was in quite a bad way. They said I'd never walk again, and I will come on to that in a later video. But after a while, I could walk again with a lot of pain, and I suffered pain for a hell of a long period of time. And I started a business then as well. So you'll be interested to hear that at a later date. Eventually, the pain subsided. It then came back with bouts of sciatica and then other back issues as well. You know, sometimes I'd get up in the night to go for a wee and have all sorts of trouble with my back and getting back into bed and everything else. And sometimes I'd be fine, but usually at least once a year, I was having chronic back problems. And I will definitely come on to that with all the medication and everything at some point. But I don't take any medication for that, and I stopped. Well, approximately 2016, I got up to go to the loo in the middle of the night and found myself lying on the bathroom floor. Now, I'd collapsed because my back had given way, and I'd had no sensation in my back or from below my waist, which is extremely scary. Luckily, I got back into bed. It subsided by the morning, and then tried to get an MRI from the NHS. It was impossible. So I went private and got a private MRI on my back, which showed several discs were damaged or misplaced, resulting in the fact that one of them was so bad that they wanted to operate. Now, this was all happening while I was doing photo walks and teaching and standing on stage and everything for Fujifilm. And I don't know if you've ever seen the videos of the vets looking at dogs' feet when they can't put their feet forward and their back's gone. Well, that happened to me. So I'm walking along and suddenly I'm getting tighter and tighter and tighter and dragging my feet, and I knew I had a serious problem in my back. So I was trying to work through that. I got back on painkillers again for a while. It just doesn't work for me. So eventually I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Terry Irwin, and he said, don't have the surgery and start doing Pilates or whatever. Anyway, it got worse and worse and worse. And I ended up seeing a chiropractor and a few other specialists. And through working with them, the back pain started to ease off. And towards the end of the back pain, this is the incredible journey. So towards the end of the back pain, I thought, do you know what? This back pain's actually slightly going. I'm actually getting to the point where I'm not having back pain anymore. And I was in Edinburgh, and suddenly I had this huge pain under my right rib cage. Excruciating pain. I won't bore you with the long story, but eventually the hotel called an ambulance. The things went on, but I was working the next day. I was actually doing a talk and a walk. So there's no way I wanted to actually go to hospital. I just wanted the ambulance. I didn't want the ambulance. But anyway, they basically gave me a load of painkillers, this, that, and the other. And I went on from there. I came home. I then was diagnosed with having to have my gallbladder out, which was excruciatingly painful nearly every day leading up to even the diagnosis. I was having daily pain with my gallbladder. Obviously, if you ever have a gallbladder needs removing, usually it's fat in your food. So if you reduce the amount of fat you eat in your food, the pain stops or subsides. Basically, the gallbladder is like a photography bulb blower, and It is a muscle that contracts, and as it contracts, it pushes bile into your stomach to help you digest. So the more fat you eat, the more it wants to do that. Now mine, from what I can work out, couldn't quite do that because it couldn't completely contract. It kept trying and trying and trying, which puts spasms in underneath the ribcage. It is excruciatingly painful. Someone said it's like childbirth. Now, women might say it's not like childbirth, but I've heard that's what it's like. And to have that 4 or 5 times a day is excruciating. And the worst thing for me at the time was it happened every night as I lay down in bed to go to sleep. It would start, and it wouldn't be an hour of pain. It would be 2 or 3 hours of pain. And whether you take, I learned in the end that if I take painkillers, drink some water, and then walk, it subsided, because you can't sit down because the pain just gets worse and you just can't sit and get anywhere in a position for it to stop. So I was going through all this, and they made a decision that I'd have to have a camera down to see if they could take the gallbladder out, make sure it was the gallbladder, there's nothing wrong inside. And I've had a camera down before, not a problem. And I don't really remember much about the camera down before. They give you a pre-med or something, you have in, or a sedative. You go in, you have the camera, you come out. You can't really remember a lot. It's probably ketamine. And then this time round, I went in for the camera, and they put the camera down. It was excruciatingly painful. I remember every single bit of it. It really, really hurt, especially when they turned the camera back round to have a look at something else. It really, really hurt. And I felt a little bit funny in there. And when I came out, they sat us down and they told me I possibly got esophagus cancer. And they're going to send off for tests. And they gave me loads of leaflets. Barrett's esophagus, they called it, but they called it something else as well. And they weren't sure with mine, which Jane and I both sat there, and the blood just drains out of your body. Anyway, a week roughly passed, and then the results came back. It wasn't Barrett's esophagus, and the tissue wasn't cancer. It doesn't mean that I hadn't lost a load of that weight that week, worrying myself sick about it. I was also still having gallbladder pain, but also I had this new thing now. I was having massive, massive pains in my head and migraines, which I hadn't had for ages. And so I went to the doctors and I said, something happened in there that caused this. And he said, no, it's migraines, it's migraines. And I thought, it's not migraines. I bloody know what a migraine is. And this is something different. Soon after that, I was sitting in the front room one morning and I went half blind in my right eye. It's like an opaqueness from the bottom down. Terrifying. But I was, as luck would have it, I was in the optician's that day for a sight test. So I told the optician, he wasn't happy, he couldn't see anything, but he said, you best go to St Paul's Eye Hospital. So I went down to hospital and I sat in there for 8 hours and saw a man who said, there's nothing that you can see now, but if it happens again, come back. The next day, again, this eye went opaque and blind, and I went down to the St Paul's Eye Hospital. They made me wait again all day. And then I was spoken to like a small child by the specialist in there and said, I don't know what you've come in for. There's nothing wrong. I don't know why you keep coming in here. I wasn't happy about that at all, but there you go. That's life. So I moved on from that. And every day then after that, I was having headaches like migraines, which I now know were TIAs. And this was constant. For everything I was doing, I was in the process of doing a house up at the time. I was trying to tile the kitchen, having TIAs, which I didn't know they were TIAs. 20 to 30 episodes a day. It was horrendous. It started to settle down slightly. And then I was in Birmingham. I think I was doing a walk or a talk. And I met up with my friends, Matt and Lee. And we were sitting having some whiskey. I think I'd done a talk. We were having some whiskey in the hotel at night. And I like my whiskey, as quite a few people know. They were drinking single malt and I was pretty knackered and it was time to go to bed. But I didn't quite feel right. Anyway, I've always had a fear of travelling and being in a hotel room in a hotel fire. So I always lay my clothes out so that if the fire alarm goes off, I can jump into my clothes and be outside and not be the person outside in their underpants. Because if you've ever had a hotel fire alarm go off, you will know there's people outside in all states of dress and half sleep. So I never want to be that person. I also want to be able to get out quick. Now, after I went in the room that night, I woke up with like a complete clarity. It was like, boom, wide awake. And I had my clothes on. The curtains were open and I have to sleep in a dark room. The shower was running. So for all intensive purposes, you think, well, were you drunk? And I thought, was I drunk? I thought, I haven't even got a hangover. What was wrong? Anyway, I said to Matt and that, I said, was I that drunk last night? And they said, well, you were slurring your words, your face was a bit droopy and you couldn't walk properly. Well, there you go. That was the day I had my stroke. Lucky for me, I was drinking single malt, which thinned my blood. From then onwards, I was having TIAs all the time, constantly. If you don't know what TIAs are, look them up. But it was constant. And I got to the stage then where I was absolutely terrified. So I went private and got another MRI on my neck and head. And phone rang one evening. It was my doctor. And the doctor said, are you sitting down? This, that and the other. You've had a stroke. You're going to keep having TIAs, this, that and the other. And you need to go into hospital tomorrow. It's quite a shock. In fact, a hell of a shock, but it did answer a lot of questions: why my memory was fading, why I was having problems, why I was having pins and needles up and down my left side, and all these things were getting worse and worse. So eventually, this has got, remember, while all this is going on, I've still got excruciating gallbladder pain most of the time. I then went into hospital. They found I had a blockage in my carotid artery on my right hand side, which threw them because that affects the left hand side of your body. If it's the right hand side of your brain, but they couldn't work out why this eye had blockages, which I'll come on to. So then they booked me in. I was straight in a scanner. Quite a shock to the system. That is when you go in a scanner and you have dye injected into your body. It started off, this was 90% blocked. And obviously when bits went through, it's clotting, which was the problem, which all these clots were flying around my brain causing all the problems. And obviously, looking back on hindsight, when they put the camera down without knowing that, my blood pressure must have gone up because the procedure wasn't very good, and that caused all the problems since. I'm not blaming the NHS, it's just one of those things. So forward onto that, they decided they're going to have to operate. Unfortunately for me, I went in to operate, and I'm telling you, when they tell you that a risk is death, further stroke, this, that and the other, it's quite a terrifying prospect. But it's that time that you can put your life in order. I actually sat down, I made sure my will was in order, I made sure everything was in order, I put my life into perspective. I said to myself, well, you've had a good life, and if you're going to go now, you're going to go now. That wouldn't have been nice for Jane or anyone else, but that's what you have to get yourself in the state of mind to do. So I'm sitting there waiting to go under the knife, and it's cancelled. It's not cancelled for any other reason except the private MRI was back to front. The MRI was obviously round the right way, but the report had written the other way. The report was written for this side. And so everything stopped until they could clarify left and right, because otherwise we'd have had a problem. Or especially I'd have had a problem because they'd have operated on this side when it was this side that was blocked, but then they couldn't work out what was going on in my brain. So anyway, operation cancelled. Lucky for me, the next day the operation was back on. I was straight back in there. The professor that started teaching this operation was the one that did the operation on me, and it was his last day. So I was totally relaxed, went in, had it done. It's a scary thing to have done. And then they put me on a set of drugs, blood thinners, etc. Unfortunately, it was a major operation, so you can't have another major operation after you had an operation, and I couldn't have my gallbladder out. For about 3 or 4 weeks, because of the medication maybe, and because I'd changed my diet, I wasn't having much gallbladder problems. And then suddenly it came back with a vengeance. So much so that I needed it taken out. I was in daily pain for up to 8 to 12 hours of solid pain. I was being picked up by ambulance, taken into A&E and given painkillers. And it was almost like every other week I was on morphine or something. And it was horrendous. Also, I then got to the point where I had to go private to get my gallbladder out because the NHS couldn't do it. The waiting list was too long. They wouldn't do it with the drugs I was on. So eventually we got to the point where I came off the drugs I was on, went on aspirin for a week, had my gallbladder taken out privately. And lo and behold, during that process, I became allergic to codeine. So after that process then, I couldn't take codeine anymore for any pain. It was horrendous. So anyway, They gave me codeine straight after the operation and I crashed. One thing led to another. They then worked out what it was, so they put me on this other weird drug, which I've still got some of at home now, which is a painkiller that if I have to have painkillers, I have to take them. Luckily, touch wood, I haven't. But the reason I'm telling you all this, and it's a long story, and it's nowhere near everything that happened, is to just give you an idea of how things can change. Now, as I say, I don't think I was going to properly semi-retire when I was. I was still doing loads of work. I was still taking on loads of work. And in my head, I had a sort of plan for the next 5 to 8 years where I would slowly wind it down, but I would work 2 or 3 days a week and everything else. And I didn't really set aside a time to think about retirement in the way I should. Having all these medical issues and then suddenly you have to stop is a hell of a shock to the system. From going from working flat out, dealing with 100 plus emails a day, planning your next trip, planning your next train journey, planning your next photo walk, dealing with social media and the internet with whatever, 14 social media accounts I used to run, to absolutely nothing. I mean, I couldn't use my phone after my stroke. I couldn't use a camera after my stroke. There's not a lot I could do. My memory, my short-term memory was gone. They even tell you not to do any financial deals with anyone until this is all sorted. As I say, I will go back over and touch on this more in the future, but that was it. Bang, retired. Now, I took the decision very quickly that I was going to have to retire. I wasn't allowed to drive. There was loads of things I couldn't do after my stroke. I just thought, well, that's it then. And I couldn't even remember my name half the time or even have a conversation like this. This is mostly free-flowed and I will have hardly any cuts in this video. Whereas after my stroke, it was just cut, because I just couldn't remember what I was talking about. So I was suddenly retired with no plan and nothing to do. And my plan was sort of for the future. Jane and I were going to travel. I spoke about it before. But I had no plan for tomorrow. I'm going to be doing nothing. What am I going to do? And I mentally struggled with that. I mean, extremely struggled with it. And as I'll come back to in the future about the little voice in your head that talks to you every day that isn't you. Oh my God, this one never shut up. And it was disastrousing everything. And it was finding everything negative to bring to me all the time. Negative, 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 negative. That's all I was getting. Negative, negative, negative. Social media, negative, negative, negative. The future, negative, negative, negative. It was just a constant niggle in my head. In the end, Jane just come home one day and said, how are you? And I said, oh, it's just driving me insane, you know. And I was struggling with Jane. Jane was struggling with me. And at one point during this whole process, Jane said to me, you're not the person that I met. That's quite an upsetting thing to hear. And I know it's true. My mood swings were horrendous. Everything had changed about me and I had to do something about that. And what's worse is I had nothing to do. There's nothing to do to take my mind off it. Time went by. I watched Netflix a lot of the day. I took the dog for a walk. I started doing longer and longer walks. But that was it. I had no plan. I think I'm going to leave it there because I want to come back onto all these things individually and I don't want to bore you all with everything I've talked about today about sickness and illness to bring me onto that and retirement. But I think I've got something relevant to say about retirement and how things like this can affect you and how you can change and what you can do. I've also done a lot of reading and studying about the mental health and the voice in your head, which I want to impart with everyone. But because I didn't plan for a fact that I could have a medical episode, which none of us think are ever going to happen, I had no answer for it. And it's one of the things that hits me quite hard in life. I thought I had a rough plan for retirement, but I didn't know what retirement was. And a lot of people die 2 or 3 years after they've retired because I think this hits them really, really hard. And then the medical side of things coming up to retirement. Fern Cotton said on Steve Bartlett's Diary of a CEO that she has this vision of herself, the one she wants to be when she's 80 with grey hair. Do you know what? You don't have to be 80 to be that person you want to be. You can be that person you want to be a lot sooner if you plan for retirement. Now, I know some people will be watching this and think they're never going to get there with their finances the way they are. And that's why I want to make these videos, because if you start planning at 20 or 15, people always think I'm mad, You can retire at 55, you can retire at 40, maybe even retire at 30. Who knows? If you get the right job and the right attitude towards it, you can give up and live your life that way. Some people have all their, the fun at the beginning of their lives. Some people have it at the end. But I think we all underestimate how long we will live or won't live. So I'm going to call that it for today. I am going to do a lot more of these. I am going to talk to some people, like a podcast on YouTube. Please tell me if you think that'll be relevant. Put it in the comments below. Because if you think I can do these and you will listen to them in the car, I'm going to carry on doing them like this. I'm going to structure this a bit more from today. This was a bit free-flowed. It was a bit ad hoc and all over the place. And it's concentrated a little bit on my journey over the last few years. So I will structure it more and I'll break it down and I'll try and include things that happened in my past. I would interview people and I'll also talk about my plans for the future and how you can plan. Take it easy. See you on the next video.